Think about the earliest memory you have. Maybe it's a birthday cake, a scraped knee, the smell of your grandmother's kitchen. You can probably place yourself inside it. The colors, the light, maybe even how you felt in that exact moment. But here's the strange part. By the time that memory happened, you were already 3 or 4 years old, sometimes older. Everything before that is gone. Not blurry, not distant. Gone, as if it never happened at all. You walked. You talked. You laughed at your parents' jokes, threw tantrums, learned to recognize faces, formed your very first attachments. None of it survived. And the real reason isn't that you were too young to notice any of it. It's something far stranger. Your brain was working perfectly during those years. It just wasn't built to keep what it found. Scientists have a name for this gap. They call it infantile amnesia. Sigmund Freud was the first to describe it over a century ago. His explanation was that children repress their earliest memories because of hidden psychological conflict. It sounded convincing for decades. It also turned out to be almost entirely wrong. The real story isn't about repression at all. It's about construction. Your brain, in those first years, wasn't hiding memories from you. It hadn't finished building the machinery to keep them. Here's what's actually happening inside a developing brain. Right now, your senses are drowning you in information every second. Sounds, faces, smells, feelings, all of it arriving at once. Most of it disappears within moments, filtered out because it isn't useful. What survives becomes a memory, stored through a delicate process inside a small, seahorse-shaped structure deep in your brain called the hippocampus. Think of the hippocampus less like a filing cabinet and more like an index card system. It doesn't hold the memory itself. It builds the map that lets the rest of your brain find that memory later. In infants, that index is still under construction. And it's under construction in the most disruptive way possible. Neuroscientist Paul Frankland at the University of Toronto ran a study that reshaped how researchers think about this entire problem. He and his team studied mice whose brains, like human infants, produce new neurons in the hippocampus at an extraordinary rate early in life. This process is called neurogenesis. What Frankland found was almost paradoxical. The faster a young brain grows new neurons, the faster its old memories get erased. New cells wire themselves into existing circuits, and in doing so, they overwrite the very connections that older memories were built on. The study, published in the journal Science in 2014, suggested that infantile amnesia isn't a flaw in memory at all. It's a side effect of a brain rebuilding itself too quickly to leave anything standing still. Why would evolution allow something like that? Because for a developing brain, growth matters more than record-keeping. An infant's world changes completely within months. Crawling becomes walking. Babbling becomes language. Whatever the brain learned at 3 months old is nearly obsolete by month 9. Holding on to that information would slow down a system that needs to keep adapting, fast. So the brain trades memory for flexibility. It clears space rather than filling a filing cabinet it doesn't yet know how to organize. But neurogenesis is only half the story. Even once toddlers begin forming memories that last longer than a few days, most of those still vanish before adulthood. Psychologist Patricia Bauer at Emory University has spent decades tracking exactly how children's memory for their own lives develops over time. Her research found that something shifts around the ages of 6 and 7. Children begin holding on to memories in a way that finally resembles how adults remember. Before that age, a memory might survive for a few months, sometimes closer to a year, before it quietly dissolves. Bauer's work points to a second piece of this puzzle. It isn't only about the hippocampus rewiring itself. It's also about a child not yet having the tools to organize experience into something coherent enough to be retrieved later. Something a mind can return to and make sense of. That word matters. Coherent. A memory isn't just a stored picture sitting in the dark, waiting. It's closer to a story your brain can retrieve, understand, and place correctly in time. That requires language. It requires a stable sense of self. It requires understanding that yesterday, today, and tomorrow are separate things, arranged in a specific order. A 1-year-old hasn't built any of that yet, so even when a memory does form, there's no scaffolding strong enough to hold it in place for the long term. It forms, and then it slips. This is where a different kind of research becomes essential. Not about brain cells, but about conversation. Carol Peterson, at Memorial University of Newfoundland, spent years studying something almost nobody thinks to ask about. How does the way parents talk to their children shape what those children go on to remember? In her studies, children whose parents used a detailed, back-and-forth conversational style, revisiting past events together and asking open questions, retained far more childhood memories years later than children whose parents simply confirmed or brushed past what happened. A parent asking a child to recall a trip to the beach, to describe what they saw first, what they did next, isn't just describing a memory back to the child. That kind of conversation helps build the very structure the memory needs in order to survive, which means your earliest memories were never entirely yours alone. They were partly built by your own developing brain and partly built by the people around you, rehearsing pieces of your life back to you until something finally stuck. There's another layer to this most people never hear about. Psychologist Chi Wang at Cornell University compared how adults from different cultural backgrounds recall their childhoods. She found that adults raised in cultures that emphasize individual experience tend to report earlier and more detailed first memories than adults raised in cultures that emphasize family and community over personal narrative. The biology of forgetting seems to be universal, but the age at which memory finally takes hold isn't fixed. It bends around the stories a culture tells its children about who they are. So what actually happened to those early years? The crawling, the first steps, the first words, the thousands of small moments that quietly shaped who you'd become. They aren't stored somewhere waiting to be unlocked with the right trigger. They're gone, the way a sandcastle is gone once the tide moves through it. The shape it left behind still changed the sand around it. But the sandcastle itself can't be rebuilt from memory. It simply isn't there anymore. And that reframes something important about who you were, long before you could remember being anyone at all. Every habit you carry, every instinct you can't fully explain, every quiet reaction that seems to come from nowhere. Some of that was shaped during those unremembered years, wired into you before your conscious mind ever came online to witness any of it happening. You are, in a very real sense, running on code that was written before you were able to read it back. Think about that the next time you flinch at something for no clear reason, or feel unexpectedly at ease in a place you've never consciously visited before. Somewhere in the years before memory began, something happened. Your brain kept the lesson. It just didn't keep the story that came with it. Modern life encourages you to think of memory like a video recording, something objective sitting in storage, ready to be replayed exactly as it happened. But memory was never built to work that way. It was built to be useful, not accurate. And nowhere is that clearer than in the years your brain quietly chose not to keep at all. Which brings you back to that first memory you thought of at the very start. The birthday cake. the scraped knee. It feels like the beginning of you. It isn't. It's simply the first moment a still-forming brain finally decided was worth holding on to, built by a mind that had already spent years becoming who you are.